Okay, hello and greetings and welcome to our monthly seminar. Today we've changed it up a little bit and I'm going to combine my in-person yoga workshop, the first one, with the Peyton Fisher School of Yoga, Peyton Fisher, who's my guru, who's here, and myself. So we're going to talk about wellness and yoga and why these things go together and how, if you really want true wellness, you probably need to incorporate yoga into your lives. So just briefly, this is sort of what we offer in my clinic. As you can see, a lot of it is complementary or alternative types of treatments and methods. I'm a big believer in natural medicine and trying to empower yourselves to get better rather than trusting us with knives or taking synthetic pharmaceuticals. So my goal is to give people tools to get better on their own and to fight aging as best you can. We're all going to age. The alternative's terrible. So what we want is optimal aging, where you can be highly functional and have great cognition as you get older and be able to do what you want. Okay. And so today we're going to talk about yoga, which I've been waiting to start this in my new clinic with my new practice for a while, but obviously the pandemic sort of put my plans on hold, but now we're able to start this. So this is our inaugural yoga workshop. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to tell you why you want to do yoga. I'm going to sort of talk about the basics, like the scientific principles, if you will, and then Peyton will take over and talk about the actual practice. He's got 20, 30 years of experience, like a lot, way more than me. And he's amazing, but he certainly understands how to make yoga work for every single type of person in every type of situation. All right, so this is my saying, yoga a day keeps people like me away. And it's actually kind of true. And I'm going to tell you this very brief overview of the scientific rationale of why yoga works. There is a ton of literature on this, to the point that even the VA Medical Center is doing yoga to treat veterans for things like PTSD, arthritis, post-amputation, IED, blast injuries. The VA is even recognized, and they are sort of the last on the block, if you will, in healthcare. Even they are using it now as a therapeutic option. People that are sort of behind are the group health insurances, because they still don't cover it for some reason. Hopefully that'll change as time goes on, but really yoga a day will keep doctors away. So why should you do it? So we're going to talk today about the meaning of yoga, the basic concepts of therapeutic yoga, which is my role here. Rather than assuming everyone's, a superstar athlete and very limber, we're taking everybody with their individual limitations, range of motion difficulties. Like some people have had ankle fusions, some people have had total knee replacements, some people have back pain and they might have like a facet arthritis issue. We can take all that into account and sort of accommodate the positions and the movements for you. And then we'll talk about, again, the scientific rationale. So the meaning and the history. So ancient tradition, correct? I mean, it's been around forever, 5,000 years that we know of with written history, but a lot of people think it's been around for really 10,000 years. So in my opinion, things that have been around that long that people keep doing, there's got to be a reason. Like ancient Chinese medicine, acupuncture, these ways of life that we in the Western world tend to poo-poo. When you've got 10,000 years of history and people seem to be healthier than us, I kind of pay attention. And so I delved into it and got very interested in natural medicine and yoga and things like that, because in my opinion, we get better results if we incorporate that. It is considered to be an outward expression of a deep mind and body connection. So too often in medicine, we have this mind-body separate treatment, and that started way back in the days of Descartes. And only now are we bringing it back, where people now realize the mind and body are very tightly connected. For instance, now in orthopedic surgery, they're finally recognizing and putting into studies what's called the biopsychosocial components of pain, because we now know that pain perception is really heavily influenced by your social context, by your mental health. For instance, people with depression and anxiety tend to feel any given pain more intensely, more frequently. They worry about it more, they perseverate. So if we can kind of help the mind, we can help the body. And yoga is probably one of the best ways to integrate them and make things work better in a better way. And I'm going to talk about why that is. there was one more thing I wanted to talk about on that. So one of the things about yoga that's awesome for me from the orthopedic standpoint is it balances the body physically. So like your quads sometimes overpower your hamstrings, or your calf muscles overpower the tib ant in the front of your leg. All these different things make your walking off, you don't work right, you hurt. Like you might have a weak hip on the right side, and believe it or not, because of the fascial interconnections, you'll feel it as left ankle pain. So for me, trying to find a way to balance and harmonize the muscles, because the human's an amazing machine, our bodies. I mean, when you really think about it and read about the human body, you're just like blown away at how perfectly designed it all is. And so yoga kind of gets us back to that like well-balanced, like it's like tuning your engine. Think of it that way. Or if you have a flat tire, fix the flat and then the car runs better. So it's a balance of the agonist and antagonist muscles, a balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Not everybody knows what that is. There's the autonomic nervous system. There's a somatic nervous system. Somatic is like, oh, I feel this. Oh, I'm moving my arm. It's like when you control and what you're consciously aware of. The autonomic nervous system it's a little bit warm in this room, so your body starts to sweat. Oh, that scares me. So you sweat, your hair stands on end, fight or flight. Autonomic nervous system regulates your gut, regulates your heart rhythm, regulates how you breathe. That's all controlled by the parasympathetic and sympathetics. So if you have sympathetic overload, which most people in the Western world do because of oxidative stress, work stress, poor diets, if you have sympathetic overload, then you're constantly in this heightened chronic inflammation state of being. What yoga does, and one of the reasons it really works well for blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, cancer prevention, immune function, yoga turns on and stimulates the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve control of the body, and it sort of just calms everything down. And by doing that, there's a direct connection between the vagus nerve, which is the main conduit between the brain and the body for the autonomic nervous system. By stimulating the vagus nerve, you can even make your immune system function better because it's in direct control of the lymphatics. I mean, I could go on and on, but it's pretty astounding what yoga does in terms of overall health just through parasympathetic amplification, if you will. Okay, go ahead. So yoga, there's lots of different translations, I guess, of the word. Essentially, we think it means join or joint, and Peyton will probably talk about this more. You join the Atma with the Paratma, or the individual self with the universal self. So it sort of just makes you comfortable of yourself, your place in the world, who you are, what you're all about. And it just kind of gives you an evenness of mind, a peace, and kind of like just takes all your stress away. And that's one of the keys to optimal aging, is de-stressing your brain, I think. It just makes everything better, obviously. And so it's a means of uniting your body with your brain. We talked about that, the agonist with the antagonist, the parasympathetic with the sympathetic. And then it's sort of a discipline, like a life discipline, like a way of dealing with your world. And then in yoga, just so you know, men are called yogis and women are called yoginis. So Peyton is my yogi. So go on. All right. One of the things I love about yoga, if you go back and read the original teachers, and again, Peyton probably talk about this, they really talked about how it improves your work life. And so work-life balance. And work doesn't necessarily mean like your job. It could be volunteering, it could be your family, it could be anything like that. But like whatever your calling is, your church work. So excellence at work through self-motivation and self-development with devotion and without attachment. So all that sort of the principles of yoga, the balance, and just sort of being better and empowering yourself and having a little bit of self-discipline, a little bit of self-accountability, and then just doing everything better in your life with full intention and not just like halfway, or just like sliding through your life. And that's what yoga can help you with too. So for me, it's a balance theory, and I'm all about balance. Everything in moderation, even moderation, right? Every now and then you're going to eat a Snickers bar. Okay. But if you adhere to a Mediterranean diet, most of the time, you're probably going to be okay as you age, things like that. So you don't need to be like fully type A, I don't ever eat tomatoes or strawberries kind of a person. You can be a little bit more balanced about it. Go on. All right. So the yoga culture, we've already talked about this. Total balance, being steadfast, performing actions, abandoning attachments. That sort of goes back to kind of the Sanskrit and the Hindu and those beliefs. But the thought is, if you can just let go of things that you're obsessed about, you'll have a better life. You know, you won't be as overwhelmed or stressed out about things. And yoga will help you achieve that, because just the deep breathing and sort of the controlling of the parasympathetic tone in your body, you kind of just let these things go. And then all of a sudden you're a little bit happier. Things are better for you. Your family's happier. Your friends are happier. You become balanced in success and failure. This way you don't obsess about, oh, I messed that up. You just try to do better the next time, kind of a thing. And we forget, it all sounds so common sense, but we forget all this. And this is part of health and wellness, in my opinion. That's why I'm a huge fan of it. It's not just, oh, you broke a bone, let's put a rod in it. You know, I want to know, how did you break your bone? Were you on a motorcycle? Can we talk about that? Those kind of things, you know, like having a better optimal life. And then that involves physical, mental, and spiritual health. Those are the traditional concept of yoga. I would say in today's modern world, you also have to have good financial health, which nobody ever talks about. We'll have some seminars on that going forward. But I think that's one of the main sources of stress for a lot of people, is their financial health. And I think if we can even get people balanced in the way they think about that and take away the stress of dealing with those kind of issues, then again, you'll have less cancer, your immune system functions better, less heart disease. Because at the end of the day, it's all caused by sympathetic overload and oxidative stress and chronic inflammation. So you have the ability to control a lot of this, not all of it, but yoga is one of the tools. All right, so there's different types of yoga, and you guys may or may not know this. There's a lot of different yogas, and Peyton's probably going to talk about all that. Hatha yoga was one of the more modern yogas that came out, and that's sort of when it was brought to the public. It used to be that only men were allowed to practice, and only by invite, back when it was in Southeast Asia and India. Now it's obviously open to the world. Hatha is one of the ways that open that. It's very slow paced, it's very gentle. A lot of times you never get on the floor. You just stand and do different things, different sides of the body. You work on breathing, one nostril, the other nostril. And it's really more about the breath and controlling your parasympathetic tone, rather than trying to become, you know, like Cirque du Soleil, which is not my goal. My goal is just wellness. There's vinyasa yoga, which basically connects your breathing to the movements. So you do certain things as you inhale, do certain things as you exhale. And again, that's by design, because it makes the body function better, makes you stronger, more flexible, controls the parasympathetics. And it's all, I mean, this has been worked out again over 10,000 years, right? These practices are a little bit more modern, so maybe 3,000 years. But it all works really well together when it's done in a guided way. Kundalini, Iyengar, Ashtanga, which is what we're going to probably do today, mostly. And then Bikram, you've probably all heard of hot yoga. That was kind of just an interesting little side note in the yoga world. Just one guy wrote a book about doing a certain sequence of positions, which everybody did in yoga. And he said it was done at a certain temperature, and he copyrighted it, and then he made it a franchise, and was very aggressive with his cease and desist for a lot of other yoga studios. So he became this sort of big thing, hot yoga. Peyton can tell you all about that. Personally, I have panic attacks in that kind of a hot room, because I hate being that hot. So I don't ever recommend hot yoga, mostly because a lot of the people I'm telling to do yoga might have diabetes or peripheral arterial disease or a heart problem. And I don't want them trying to do Ashtanga in a room that's like 90 degrees. You may notice it's a little bit warm in here. It's 75. We set that by design. If it's too uncomfortable, let us know. But Peyton will tell you the optimal temp for normal yoga is 75 to 80 degrees. And why? Because it loosens up your muscles right away. And you don't have to fight that sort of cold, stiff, like your Achilles tendon being stiff, your wrist being stiff. So we've set it at that temperature on purpose. Okay, so the basic concepts. So we've got core concepts of Ashtanga: body, nervous system, mind. And it's all interconnected. I mean, we all know that. Everybody here has had one condition or another, and you know how your nervous system plays into the body, plays into the mind. We use set sequences of movements to achieve the goals of the practice. We increase your muscle strength, your physical power, make you feel more confident in your body. And then again, synchronize the breath with the movements. And with that breathing, you create internal heat, start the detoxification process of getting bad stuff out, and then also control your parasympathetic tone, which is, again, one of the key components of the health benefits of yoga. So the vinyasas are flowing movements. Peyton sort of mentioned the sun salutation. This is showing you part of that. And you don't have to do all of this as well as this gentleman is doing it, because, I mean, I can't achieve that jackknife folded position yet. And I've been doing yoga for a number of years, but we'll kind of guide you through this, but basically it shows you, you know, arms overhead, you're breathing, you're working on your inhale, exhale, you've got your pelvis positioned a certain way, you're working on your core. It all seems like simple positions and simple movements, but you're doing a lot for your body while you're doing it. And then bending over, you're stretching your hamstrings, you're stretching your long, low back, you're working on your pelvis. You're even working on your ankles because you have to keep them at neutral for that position. So every position is doing a lot for you in sequence, and they all build on each other. And so you start with easier things that warm you up, and then you go a little bit harder, a little bit harder, a little bit harder to whatever you can tolerate. And so there are 3 places of action in the theory: the breath, your pose. Okay, so you have to breathe correctly, and Peyton will talk about that. The pose, that's the asana, you know, like the sun salutation, or when you're holding your leg up in the air, which I can't really do still. Different little positions, and they're all important for different muscles. And then the focus, or the drishti. So you need to have focus while you're doing this. If you can focus on looking one place, then you don't worry about what's around you, and you just worry about yourself. And that's the key. You don't want to be worried about, oh, is somebody looking at me? Oh, what's my shirt doing? Oh, is my pony okay? Like, we don't want you thinking about all that. You just got to focus on yourself, how you feel, and then if you're uncomfortable, let us know. We'll adjust your position. But the whole purpose of this is to basically let you, I mean, we all have another good 30, 40, 50 years to live. Let's do it well, right? Instead of just being like stuck in a house with nothing to do because we're either too scared to do it or we really can't. And I think that we all have it in our power to live our best lives, if you will. And this is one of the ways to do it. So we talked about this, I think, in the beginning. Just so you know, the first written work of yoga was the Yoga Sutra, and that was about 2,000 years ago, 3,000. And I'm saying written like on paper, because it was written on palm leaves before that, but nobody could really read that because it all fell apart. They just had evidence that there was writing on palm, like people were writing about this 5,000 years ago. And it's basically a teaching from the guru. The way it used to be is almost an apprenticeship. So again, it was an invited student to the guru. Again, mostly all male. Like, women didn't start doing it till maybe Indra Devi, or wherever you can talk about that, when women were allowed to do it. But a man would invite his student, and it would be a verbal apprenticeship. And that's how the tradition was passed on. So the first guide was this Yoga Sutra that opened it up to the public, to the world. And most people look at it as a guidebook for dealing with the challenges of being human, which I think is the core of being healthy and well, right? It's difficult to be a person, particularly in the modern age, particularly in this country with all the stress and stuff going on around us lately. And this is just sort of, it's like a self-help method of dealing with life, other people's stress, and your personal physical issues. So what do you get from yoga? You get relaxation, you get self-awareness, body control, you get self-control or discipline. You become empowered, you have less stress, you unlearn bad habits that damage you. People have even learned to reduce their cravings for bad, highly processed foods because the yoga just takes away the cravings. You get strength, you get balance, you get better bone mass, believe it or not. This is actually a proven treatment for osteoporosis. And you improve brain health, and we'll talk about that. Because when you do yoga, if you do the breathing properly, you effectively get more oxygen into your brain because the blood vessels dilate because your carbon dioxide levels go up with the breathing. So your oxygen levels stay pretty much the same no matter what you do. The human body was designed that way. But you can control your carbon dioxide levels, and then that changes if your vessels are constricted or open, which is through the parasympathetics. So you can actually improve oxygen blood flow to your head just by doing the breathing in yoga. So if you just do the breathing 5 minutes, you're going to help your brain. So it's pretty amazing and pretty powerful. So I'll just go run through some quick studies for you. In 2013, they looked at 313 patients. This was a randomized controlled trial. One group did back education, the traditional treatments like, oh, here, do these McKenzie exercises. Here's a piece of paper, go home. And one group did yoga, and they found that yoga had greater improvements than the typical way we treat back pain non-operatively in this country. 2009, Spine Journal, which is the #1 trade journal, if you will, for spine surgeons. 90 patients of yoga versus the usual care, again, the non-operative. They found that not only did it improve function, pain, and depression levels, but it actually also lowered opioid usage, which most things in spine world do not. Lumbar fusions, discectomies, most people continue to take the same, if not more, opioids after surgery. Yoga actually dropped it. 2003, this study, 100 subjects, again, yoga, one group, control group, other group, all 40-year-olds or older. They followed the pulse rate, the blood pressure, and then the Valsalva ratio, all improved with yoga. And the authors concluded that yoga reduces age-related deterioration in cardiovascular functions. So you can actually improve your cardiovascular health probably better than a lot of the medications on the market if you do this practice. And then in 2005, there was an 8-week Iyengar yoga plan specifically for people with knee arthritis. So they made a program around that. You know, the moves would all support knee arthritis. And they found that there were significant reductions in the WOMAC pain score. That's one of our validated pain scores when we look at like total knees and stuff. Do they do well? The WOMAC score got better and the AIMS-2 score got better. And they concluded that this is a, quote, feasible option for obese patients over 50 with knee arthritis, which is my point. Most doctors see an obese patient over 50 years old with knee arthritis and they give up for you. Don't do any activity. Here, take these pills and just call me when you're ready for your total knee. And I mean, patients tell me that's what they hear over and over and over again. And personally, I find that insulting. If somebody said that to my mom, I would be very angry because you can do more and you can empower yourself and you don't have to just take a bunch of pills and sit on the couch and wait until your joint surgeon can put you on the schedule, my opinion. So hopefully we'll give you guys some help in that world. All right, so longevity, let's talk about that. A lot of people, you know, I always tell my patients, if there's one thing that you can count on, if people in the celebrity world in Beverly Hills are doing something, there's probably something to it because they're not paying cash and doing anything that's not going to make them healthier, look better, and live longer. And they are all doing yoga. It is definitely making them healthier. It's definitely making their health better, and it's definitely making them live longer. How does it do this? Again, through the parasympathetic tone. So you can actually, has anybody heard of telomeres? So telomeres are little tails on the end of your DNA. Every time a cell divides, the telomere shortens. So anything that can stabilize that or add these things to the end of the DNA makes you live longer with fewer chromosomal abnormalities, less cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Yoga has been shown to increase telomere length. So does rapamycin, so does metformin. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in the anti-aging world right now, but yoga can lengthen the telomeres. And so you'll find people that do yoga long-term, like they might be 80 and they look like they're 60. You're like, well, how is that possible? Well, yoga is doing it in and of itself. Increased muscle mass and strength. One of the biggest problems with aging is what we call sarcopenia, which means as we age, particularly women, we lose muscle mass. Well, the body doesn't work so great without muscle mass. One of my family members has a disease where you lose muscle mass and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's very hard to live that way. And, you know, naturally we all lose a little bit of muscle, but we don't have to. We can fight that, or we can gain our muscle back. Remember, we're all living in a very modern world. We're sitting and looking at a computer and we're sitting on a chair all day and we're not out in the farm. We're not out hunting and foraging. We're not using our bodies the way they were intended to be used. Yoga lets you be a little bit more back to nature, if you will, back to how you should be. And then increasing muscle mass and strength. Bone strength, we talked about that, and we talked about all of the benefits of the parasympathetics. Weight loss. You actually slow your metabolism with yoga, which is another way it ages you better. So people with slower metabolisms live longer. But you would think, well, that's counterintuitive. Wouldn't that make me bigger and gain weight? But it actually reduces your cravings. So you actually just become healthier and you eat to what your body needs. You don't eat just to eat. So even while you're reducing your metabolism, you'll still lose weight doing yoga. Helps depression. We talked about that. Reduces anxiety. Glycemic control, heart rhythm, tone and strength, all that's through the parasympathetics. All right, spine health. So we talked about that. So here's a guy, and he's no spring chicken, but look at his limberness, his nice hamstring line, his back is nice and curved. You'll be able to do these things, I promise, if you start slow and incrementally improve. If your spine works well, it basically makes everything work better because the spine is where everything starts. It's the axis. It connects your limbs to each other. It holds the rib cage. It holds the diaphragm. So you need to have pretty decent spine motion for everything else to work well, which is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of people that get lumbar fusions, or the doctors are recommended, I should say, because once you fuse the spine, well, you're already limited normal mobility and motion, and of course everything's going to go downhill from there. It's almost like, I mean, it's so predictable. So less nerve pain with better spine function. I see and treat a lot of nerve pain in this clinic, and one of the things I do is send them to physical therapy for techniques we call nerve glides, nerve flossing. So for instance, let's say you had a cervical like burning pain in your hands and fingers, different things like this where you're putting the radial nerve, the brachial plexus on a stretch, and then you stretch, relax, stretch, relax. All of that can increase the limberness of the long nerve roots as they exit the spine and go to your distal appendages. And then yoga does this for you too. You don't need to always go to physical therapy. You can just do a yoga program. Stress and pain, we talked about. All right, chronic pain. So they've studied yoga for seniors and they found that it reduces depression, reduced anxiety, reduced high blood pressure, and cardiac disease. And we're talking about people like 60, 70, 80 that they put into yoga programs. And then, I mean, this has just been written about over and over again in the chronic pain world. Not necessarily in a lot of the main surgical journals, but again, like I told you, it's offered in the VA now for chronic pain. It's a validated way to treat opioid abuse because it reduces cravings and makes people feel better, and it helps with that. So for a lot of patients with chronic pain, they don't believe me at first ever that yoga is going to help them, but if I can ever get them started, they find that it actually does. And people just feel better. You just have less pain. And then one thing I do want you to be aware of, there are reports of injuries in yoga, obviously. Some people take it a little bit too far, I'll say, and try to do things that they couldn't do or shouldn't do, or maybe they don't understand their own restraints. That's why if you're going to do yoga, I think you should start in a guided thing with somebody that knows what they're doing, at least initially until you sort of get used to the position so you can kind of understand your own limitations. Because the last thing you want to do is be trying to do a move at home and fall and break your hip. I mean, you've kind of defeated the purpose. So you do want to be careful with it. But if it's done in a careful, guided way, the injury rates are actually extremely low. But it is something to think about. By moving the joints, you give nutrition to the cartilage. The only way cartilage gets nutrition is through diffusion. There's no blood flow to cartilage. It does not have its own blood flow. So you have to move your joints to roll the synovial fluid around, which brings nutrition to the cartilage. So yoga helps with that. So a lot of times doctors, at least in the older literature, and I think some of them still do it, somebody like gets hurt, they say, oh, don't exercise, stop, stay at home, don't do anything, don't work. It's like the worst thing you can do for someone. And this is one of the reasons. If you do nothing, your joint deteriorates faster than like if you were doing like Zumba or like, you know, singles tennis and trying to beat yourself up, because the body has to move to stay healthy. All right, core strength. This is one of the primary reasons yoga helps give you benefits. So there's 4 layers of abdominal muscles. You know, we always think of the 6-pack, which is the rectus abdominis, but there's layers around and beyond that, and they all attach to the pelvis, the rib cage, the spine, and parts of them attach to the diaphragm. So your core is massively important to all of your health, and the breathing, along with holding the positions and doing the bandhas, and Peyton's going to talk about that, certain physical locks, you can actually improve your core strength very easily without having to do down dog. You don't have to do headstand position, all that craziness. You can, and one day maybe even I'll be able to, but I can't do the handstand position yet. But the core strength is huge in yoga. All right, we talked about the muscle strength and pain. Stretching. So there's different ways of stretching. One of them is passive, another is active, another is reciprocal. So like if you're doing this move and you flex your quad, you will actually reciprocally inhibit the hamstring, and the hamstring relaxes more. So that's that agonist antagonist. So if you flex the opposite muscle, the muscle on the other side of whatever body part will, by definition, on a reflex, relax more, and you can get more of a stretch and stretch the tendons a little bit more. And we're going to teach you all of that because it's hard to understand until you physically do it and feel it. Passive stretching is more like this. So this person is on a yoga block doing a bridge, and this lets you kind of passively relax the iliopsoas, which are the large, it's the pork loin. So you know the large tubular muscle, that is your iliopsoas. It starts on the front of the spine on either side and goes through the pelvis to the hip. It's actually a hip flexor. Gets very tight in most people. Mine is tight. People with a snapping hip, it's usually this tendon that comes down and is crossing the femoral head with motion. If you can relax that, look what it's controlling. The lower back, the pelvis, the hip. Hugely important muscle. easy to stretch with yoga, and we'll show you how. So again, we talked about all of the age benefits, the optimal aging aspects of yoga. I mean, what are the things older people complain about? They feel weak, they feel stiff, they can't do everything, they have poor balance, they're at risk of hip fractures, they're stressed out, they're depressed, they eat too much. Yoga can fix all of this. And it might sound too good to be true, but it's really not. If you think about it scientifically, with the balance muscles, making your spine work better, controlling your breath, and stimulating the parasympathetics, then you're like, oh, duh, of course it does all that. Every action is an equal and opposite reaction. That's what we talk about, agonists, antagonists. So an agonist is the muscle doing the action. The antagonist is the one balancing it on the opposite side. So if I do this, if I do a tennis backhand, that's my triceps. But at the same time, my biceps is controlling this so it doesn't flail all over the place, right? So everything has an opposite and equal balancing action. What happens with us in our human bodies is we get out of balance, and yoga helps you get back in balance. So we'll eventually talk about open chain, closed chain. That's the one I just really struggle with. You'll never see me do that. I can do this. We're going to get there and show you all of this. What open chain means is that a limb is free and doing activities freely in the air. Closed chain just means you're grounded and the muscles are grounded on the ground and you're doing the actions and motions. So it's closed. You're like a closed chain of kinetic flow versus open. Synergy and breathing. I'm going to let Peyton talk about the breathing a bit more. Basically, you're expanding your chest, opening things up. The vagus nerve runs straight down through there. And then the breath also controls, again, the carbon dioxide levels, which balances the oxygen in your body. So the deep breathing, controlling the diaphragm, doing the internal locks in your pelvis and the core, all of this matters. And that's probably the most important part of yoga, more important than doing show-off moves and things. If you can master this part, then you will be doing yourself a huge favor as you get older. You'll have better posture breathing. I mean, we've all talked about, I can go on and on. These are conditions that's been shown to improve in the literature: fibromyalgia, anxiety, diabetes, hypertension, all of the spinal pains, chronic pain, again, reduced opioid usage and general arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. There's validated studies showing it even helps with the inflammatory arthritides, which is when your body is self-attacking on an ongoing basis. So I like to say no excuses. Pain is weakness leaving the body, right? Just kidding. It's a military saying. But I just want you to be comfortable. We're going to make it very comfortable. It's very important that people do this. This is kind of a passion of mine, and I know it's a passion of Peyton's. And if I can every year get a couple people to start doing yoga, I'll feel like I've achieved my mission of improving health and wellness.